Yes, now it's written.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're live. Good morning, everyone. We're very happy to start our second meeting of the critique and the novel. Today, very special. I mean, this year has been special already because we started with an author, also a scholar and an author, and this time we're again having a writer who is also an essayist, a scholar, a poet, novelist. Egana Djabbarova. She was born in Russia into Azerbaijani family, and she's the author of several poem collections of poems, one of which was translated into Portuguese and released in 2024, yeah, by the
Mhm.
publishing house Ars e Vita. It's called Bala. You can already find it out there. And now, today, I mean, I think today is going to be the first day that Egana will be talking about her first novel published in Portuguese. It has a very long name. The hands of the women of my family weren't destined to writing. If this is a good
Yeah.
translation into English, something like it. As mãos das mulheres da minha família não eram destinadas à escrita. That's what it sounds like in Portuguese. That was translated by Maria Vragova, the editor and translator of Ars e Vita. So Egana is now currently, since 2024, she's living in Germany, in Hamburg. After fleeing Russia for her work and activistic work in feminism and LGBT sphere, and also this book that we're about which we're talking today has received the award in the Hamburger Literaturpreis, the award of literature of Hamburg. So yeah, it's a very big pleasure and a great honor to receive Egana with us today. We're going to start off by hearing a little bit from you, Egana, whatever you want to talk about the book, about your career, whatever you want to say to us, share with us. And then, like as usual, we're going to have a discussion, a conversation with our traditional colleagues, Thiago and Julia, and also with the participation of the audience that is following us now live stream on YouTube. Okay, good,
Yeah.
excellent. Egana, the floor is yours. We're happy and excited to hear you today.
Thank you so much. Yes, I guess first of all, of course, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for having me and inviting me here because it's such a big honor and it is truly a happiness to talk about the Portuguese translation. I'm really looking forward what we will discuss today. Yeah, maybe I should tell a little bit a story about how the novel was created because it was created under really interesting circumstances. First of all, it was written in 2023 when I was living in Taipei, which is really surprising, maybe because so in 2022 I left. I started working in Taipei in National Genji University. I was teaching Russian as a foreign language and Russian literature. It is my field of it is my profession, so I was doing that for 8 years. Right now, I'm kind of unemployed because I'm only the writer. But before that, I was all the time constantly teaching, also in academia, first in Russia and then in Taiwan, and it was absolutely incredible. I do miss Taiwan so much on so many levels, but unfortunately I couldn't stay. It's also really long and dramatic story why, but I was kind of forced to go back to Russia, and then after that the rest story is already known. So I was also forced to leave country in 6 months, and now I am living in Germany. But so because I was really privileged to have this amazing job, and I was living on an island in the middle of Pacific Ocean, in the middle of almost nowhere. Like you are surrounded by water, you have so many time. It was it was winter, and I also had some holidays, so we didn't have any classes, and I could concentrate myself and only on my novel. I really often think why it took me, to go to Taiwan to go so far away from the places where I was born and raised to write this novel? And I do think that the answer is because it is after fictional novel, and it is something you should, of course, know about this novel. Also, it's after fictional, but what does it mean? It means it's based on my biography. It's really based on things which happened to me in real life, but at the same time, it's still literature. So as we remember in the word, in term itself, after fiction, we have two parts. After and fiction, it means, yes, you base your story on a real life and on your own biography, but your aim, your main goal is still to make and to create an art piece. So that's why you will never fully know the percentage of reality in the novel. Because, for example, if we talk about biography or when we talk about memoirs, it's different because they working like documents. They should be like really close to reality, but after fictional text is not like that. And when you work with this type of material, it's actually, you need something to distance yourself, so separate yourself from the novel, from the material, because it's your own life experience. And to transform it into literature, you should be like, you should have some instruments to separate yourself from this experience. And I guess in a really strange way, but being on Taiwan actually worked this way. So this was the distance I needed, because I was so far away from the places where I was born and raised, and I could look at my life as a narrative. I was able to see my own experience as a narrative, and plus I was just, it gave me enough time, enough distance, and enough, like separation to create the novel. And then it was published by feministic independent publishing house called No Kidding Press in Russia in 2023. Unfortunately, nowadays, this publishing house no longer exists, because it's a dark times for almost all publishing houses now, but especially for feministic one, because technically speaking, there are no laws, but in real life, anything you do devoted to feminism in Russia now is really like problematic, because it's somehow prohibited. Nobody wants it anymore. And the publishing house was under a big pressure. So they basically were forced to close themselves. But fortunately, like really extraordinary, but the novel was republished now in 2026 in other Russian publishing house called Новое литературное обозрение, NLO, and I'm really honored and I'm really glad that it happened. So we have basically two versions of this novel. First one was written in 2023 and was published by No Kidding Press, and nowadays, unfortunately, you cannot find it anywhere anymore. And second version was published now in 2026 by publishing house NLO. And this version is different, because in the second edition, I added poetic part. I decided that I should add the poetic part because they work together, they function together. And I'm really glad that Maria and Gustavo, they decided to take the second edition. So they took the second edition, and the Portuguese book also consists from the novel itself and also from the poetic part. And maybe the last important thing about the composition, why about this poetic part, is that it consists from two poetic cycles, big poems. First one is written in 27 actually, and it's titled Romberg Pose, and it was written during me being diagnosed. So it was really really fresh. I wrote it in the middle of me getting diagnosis. And I was in a hospital, and basically it's a documentary cycle, because I was in a hospital just collecting stories of people who were with me in my hospital room and were in the hospital general. So I was constantly speaking with people, collecting the material, and then I created the documentary cycle called Romberg Post. And second cycle was written in 2024. And it's also documentary, but it's completely different because it was based on my real instruction. So, and now I should maybe explain what instruction what instruction I'm talking about. So one of the biggest part of this novel is devoted to my diagnosis and to my disease. I was diagnosed in 2017 with generalized dystonia. It was really long way to be diagnosed. It took doctors 3 years. Because we lost so much time, we couldn't use any traditional medication. It didn't work. And the only option I had was deep brain stimulation. And in 2018, I did a brain stimulation, so a deep brain stimulation, a brain surgery. And now I am a human being living with deep brain stimulation. And when they operated me, they give me, first of all, remote control. So now I do have remote control from myself, which is really ironic, I think. And second, they give me the manual. And I was constantly thinking to do something with this manual. I really wanted to create something based on this manual, but for some strange reason, it took me 6 years. So I created it only in 2024, when I was living in a refugee camp in Germany. And it also was really interesting why I could write it only under that circumstances. Maybe being, so in a strange way, being migrant, being someone pushed out your house, of your home, being someone constantly facing otherness, constantly facing oppression in many, many ways. Only in that position, I could really work with this manual. So what I did, I based the text is based on the manual only. Some of the parts I wrote them myself, and they are cursive, so you can see them because they are graphically different from other text. So one of the some parts of the text are rewritten directly from the manual, and some of the text I wrote myself, and I created a special documentary cycle based on this manual, which expressing not only me being someone with disease, but also me being migrant and refugee, and being someone really losing control of her life. It was really interesting that losing control in your body is really like losing control of your life in general, because what it means to be migrant, and especially forced migrant, it basically means losing control, total control on your life, and not being subject anymore, because you are constantly object. When you enter the country, you have no language, you have no speech, you are no one, nobody knows you, you have zero social capital, you're nobody, and basically you all the time feel yourself object, especially when you live in the refugee camps, because the space itself of refugee camps are really like it's you don't feel yourself human being fully. And maybe being in that condition actually helped me to look through on my disease and manual and rewrite it. So that's why the book is really interesting, because you can look, for example, to the disease from 3 perspectives. You have 3 chronological periods, you have 3 types of text, and all of them are connected to my body. So the main hero of this novel is, of course, my own body. And the composition of novel itself, it screams it, because all chapters are part of female body, so especially my body. So yes. And actually, funny thing, when you were translating the title in English, it is the perfect answer to the question why we changed the title in a US edition, because the novel was recently also translated in English. It was published in US by New Vessel Press. And we also we had such a long discussions about what to do with title, because, for example, in German, the title works. It works perfect. It works like poetry. And in Portuguese also. So when you say the title, it almost works like a poem. But in English, it wasn't this way. It was too long. It was too difficult. Phonetically doesn't work, and that's why we decided to change. And that's why US edition calls My Grateful Body. So the US and UK editions, they have different title. And why? The perfect answer is, look at you can look previous few minutes when you were trying to read it, to tell it in English. That's why we changed the title. Yeah. So I think this is the main like introduction information, but I can of course answer any question or tell more information about something specific. Yeah. So
Thank you, Egana. I think we're going to have a lot to discuss. I mean, from the preview you gave us, I think, and we have read the novel, so we have many things that we know we can talk about. We will hardly exhaust everything we can discuss about your work. I would let me add my fellow colleagues to the stage. Welcome, Julia and Tiago. They're going to be joining us for the discussion. And the audience, you can keep commenting. We can use your questions and bring your comments to Egana here. Egana, it was very interesting to hear you talking about the circumstances under which you wrote the novel and the poetic part, because I think it explains not everything, but it explains a lot about the process of how you were able to talk about yourself, at the same time trying to distance yourself. I mean, doing something to yourself, which is very difficult when we are living. We just like we just live. It's a flow. We don't have the distance to create upon. I mean, there were some experiments maybe in the 20s last year. The symbolists were trying to create life, жизнь, творчество, and so on, but that was hard, and I think we struggle with that still. There are several topics we can discuss, but I would like to start by one, which is a very literary one. One of the things that struck me when I was reading your novel, so just a few little information, is that the novel is divided into chapters, each chapter dedicated to a part of the body. So a very interesting, eyebrows and eyes are different, shoulders and legs, and the belly and mouth and tongue. I mean, this is also almost part of my question. What I liked, I really liked that the way that you were using the parts of the body as literal, in their literal sense. I mean, the eyebrows, really, the part of the body, that part of the body, the eyes. I mean, the eyes in literature has always been a very metaphoric thing in the description of characters and so on. And you use this metaphoric potential of parts of the body in a very interesting way. So some of it was even difficult to translate, I can imagine. That I should ask Maria. But anyways, like you use, when you talk about the eye, you're talking about that organ, but also about evil eye, the way people look at each other, and the way they gossip, and the way they observe, the capacity of observing and being observed. That was very important. When you talk about the tongue, it appeared. Masha is here listening, so she can even maybe participate. In Portuguese, it was good because it works just like in Russian. Jazyk, língua, is the same word for language and for the organ. So it was, there you have it. The metaphor is already there. So you're talking about the organ, but you're also, of course, have all the chance to talk about language, to talk about your language, the language of your family, and evil speaking also. You also talk about like this, using the language to say bad things about other people, gossiping. That was very much part of culture. And the belly was also very interesting because belly, but that works better in Russia, I guess, because in Russian, живот is connected to the verb live, жизнь, жить, жизнь, and so on. Maybe in Portuguese, at some point, I think Masha uses ventre, vida, viver, vida, which gives a good connection. But I think Barriga is not necessarily a word that we can refer to as belly doesn't refer to live, living, and so on. So if you could expand a little bit on how you were using like these parts of the body, it was like as a way of exploring further not only the concrete aspect of life and culture embedded in our physical bodies, but also expanding it further into cultural relations and, I mean, the metaphorical aspect of each of these parts.
Yeah, because it was exactly what I wanted to do, because I wanted to tell not only story about your visual body, your physical body as something obvious, something, I don't know, consisted from parts and so on, but also about body as evidence of your existence in a really deep way. Because your own biological body is not only evidence of your existence, it's also evidence of existence of all your ancestors. Because actually the color of your eyes, your diseases, your type of face, your type of nose, and so many things are connected to people you don't even know or maybe never met. But all of them are part of your genes. All of them are part of your history, a part of your being you. So it's really like, and that's why, for example, every part is not only describing my body part, but also body parts of mother of my mother of my father, and so on. Because I am not only my unique separated body, I am the body of all of them at the same time. And this is what makes our bodies so beautiful. We never alone, actually. We cannot be alone, because our body itself is already a result of being a part of these ancestors, of this really long story. We are the part of culture. Because sometimes you can see people saying, especially if we talk about conservative cultural societies, and Azerbaijani is unfortunately one of them, when, for example, you have a lot of strict rules, how you should act, what you can do, what you can wear, and so on. And really often when you don't act as they want you to act, they start to tell you're not Azerbaijani. You cannot tell that you're Azerbaijani. So I totally disagree with that. Because my own body is already a result of all these people, all these blood and genes at the same time. So I am a part of this culture. And even if I'm not acting the way you want me to act, I'm still a part of this culture. And also, I'm really into the colonial thought. It's something which really inspires me. It's something in which I'm really, really interested. And I'm trying to now, I'm not affiliated with any university yet. I'm not, because again I'm unemployed, but I'm doing it independently. So I'm really into decolonial thought, and I'm really looking like what's going on in Russian-speaking literature, in Russophone literature in this direction. And one of the really interesting decolonial thinkers, Nelson Maldonado Torres, he wrote this amazing article called "Coloniality of Being." And this article, he actually expresses that being other, being a part of being a colonized, being a minority, it also means that your being is always under the question. So it's not automatic. You should prove, you should somehow deserve your right of being. And really often for colonized people, it was through war. So, for example, they should go to the war for imperia, yeah, and then they are subjects. But before that, they are not subjects. Their right of being is constantly under question. So, unfortunately, when you are part of minority, it is this way. When you are part of unseen minority or minority under oppression, it means your being, your subjectivity, your agency is all the time under question. And first thing, how you can return it, how you can return to your own, put on back your own subjectivity, is actually your own body. Because your own body is the evidence of you being here, and it's also a way to say, I am here. I wanted my body to be so obvious. I wanted the reader to feel my hand, to feel my eyes, to feel my body physically when he reads or when she reads this novel, because I wanted them have zero chance to escape my body. They cannot escape my body. Like, I'm constantly showing my body, I'm constantly touching them through the words, because I want them to see that I'm existing. And so I wanted to do something opposite to what Ken Gonzalez Day. And now a little bit of advertisement of one of my favorite artists. I love him so much. He's such a genius. It's my life dream to meet him one day. It's a Latin American artist, Ken Gonzalez Day. He lives in Los Angeles, and he's genius. He made a work which I truly believe is genius. He created artwork named Erased Lynching. So what he did, he is a scholar, he's a researcher himself, and also he's an artist. And he was trying to look into lynching in US, but not in soft states, but in nerve states. He was kind of interested what was going on in this topic, with this topic in nerve states, because we have this tendency to think that lynching was a practice for soft states against slaves, and it was the way how they were destroyed and killed, unfortunately. But Ken Gonzalez Day is asking herself, okay, but what was happening in other states? So he went to archives and in libraries, and he found out 300 cases of lynching in nerve states. And what is absolutely insane, he found out that the victims were not African American. They were part of ethnic minorities. For example, Mexicans, Chinese, and so on. And then during his research, he found a postcards with lynching. It was a real postcards. I mean, people were sending these postcards, for example, to their moms, like, hey, mom, I'm entered the university, how are you doing? And on the other side of this postcard, you could see real scene of lynching, real scene of somebody being died, somebody being killed by lynching. And so he was so shocked, of course, by that. Of course, at some point, US prohibited these postcards, and now they are available only in archives. But at some point, they were really used. So he found these postcards, and what he did next is absolutely genius. He created an artwork where he actually erased victims. So what you see a postcard. So you see a tree, because usually it was hanging, unfortunately. So you see a tree, and you see a crowd around this tree looking at somewhere, but there is nobody. And I truly believe it's absolutely genius, because by doing so, first of all, he returned back the subjectivity and agency of these victims. He gave them right not to be there. They never had this right, so he gave them this right. And also, he made us look at killers, because it's also what Susan Sontag was writing about when we're looking on these war pictures, on war photographs. Unfortunately, now it's really relevant and actual. And we see the victims of war crimes and the victims who were killed, and what is going on at that moment. We do not see them as people. We see them as objects. So by erasing the parts, the bodies, he actually did opposite. He returned their subjectivity. And also he made us think about killers and not victims. But I'm so sorry for this small lecture, but why I'm telling all this really long story about Ken Gonzalez Day, not only because I do believe he's genius and everybody should know his work, but also because what I was doing is really opposite to what he was doing. So I was doing opposite. I wanted my body to be so obvious, to be evident in several layers at the same time. And I wanted the body function as, of course, not only as a physical body, but also as not only as a physical body, but also, yes, as a metaphorical space, a body as a heritage in general, the body as something, it's your main story also. Because actually it's a known fact, but the title of the novel was, the original title which I wanted to make was Jehis. It's Azeri word, and it means dowry. It's something which is given to women, then women go when they get married. So, and I wanted to title novel this way, but unfortunately my publishing house told me, oh no, nobody will nobody will be interested because it's as a rebirth and nobody will understand, and so on and so on. But actually, this title also explains why the composition, why it's composed this way, because the body is also Dori, it's also a heritage at the same time. And that's why I'm working with all these layers at one moment, at one time. Yeah, so sorry for such a long abstract description, but I just wanted to explain it fully. Yeah.
I think you put it very concisely and beautifully in the book when you say unlike the memory, the body doesn't lie, right? Never lies, you say. And I think it was a good way to being like true to yourself and like through the body, not only to expose it, but to explore the contradictions. I think there's a lot we can say about like contradictions between the culture you were born into, the culture you were raised in because you were born and raised in Russia, and not many people know. Maybe this is something we could even like talk a little bit about, how multi-ethnic and multinational and multi-religious the Russian Federation is, despite all the efforts, the recent efforts, and not only the recent efforts to erase that, to show that as a Slavic homogeneous country, as something that you have worked as a Russian language teacher for foreigners. And this is something that's very surprising for people when I am myself also a Russian language teacher for foreigners. And because Brazil and Russia are two very big countries, and we are very used to the fact that in Brazil, Portuguese is our language, but Portuguese is very different depending on where you go. And there is at least an attempt to say that Russian is a very homogeneous language. It's like there are not so many differences in pronunciation. There are manuals to explain phonetics, for example. And this is something that we couldn't do in Portuguese, just couldn't. There is no way we can say like this is the right way to say a certain word. And in Russia, you do that, even if it's not exactly the truth, right? And I think this experience of otherness that you have had yourself, and now knowing that you have written the book when you were away from both Azerbaijan and Russia, is also like another layer of how this experience of otherness has provoked you and has inspired you into doing the work that you do. I was thinking about like your experience as a Russian teacher, how you speak very fondly of it, and you have also taught literature as well at the university. How does that work inform you somehow, or how is it important for you? Because after all, it's language, right? You, as a writer, language is your matter, is your material, but as a Russian, as a language teacher, you deal with it in a different way. And as a teacher professor of literature is also, I guess, different. How has this different experiences informed each other and helped you or not somehow?
Yeah, it is like really, really a complicated question, because I was teaching Russian as a foreign language for many years, and I constantly kept feeling myself an imposter, because so usually my students were foreign students who came to Russia and they want to enter university, but before the entering, they should pass at least B1 level, B1 level. So they started they go to this intensive language course, and we study like for 5-6 hours every day of Russian for them to pass the exam. And usually how it works, when foreign students, they automatically assume that I'm Russian because I teach Russian as a foreign language, and I don't know, because I speak Russian and so on. And I all the time felt myself imposter, because I'm not ethnically Russian. And for example, I'm not a big fan of Russian cuisine, for example. So when they were asking me what food do you like from the Russian cuisine, I was like, oh, you know what, I do like Azerbaijani cuisine. I mean, it was really funny. It was really difficult to put it together. And also, it's sad, but it's fact that Russian is also a colonial language as English, for example. So it has a big colonial violence inside, especially now it's getting even worse. And it's also like really interesting because I lost. I mean, I do speak Azerbaijani, but my Azerbaijani is so poor. It's so home Azerbaijani. It's like I cannot express anything difficult, anything abstract in Azeri because my Russian is much better than my Azeri. And because I'm also a result of this Russification at some point, it's also really difficult because I am seeing a language not only as a beautiful, I do believe that language can be, and it is the bridge which puts us together and allows us to bring, to fully understand each other. But at the same time, I cannot ignore this colonial past of the language and present of the language. And so yeah, so I was I do want to believe that Russian at some point will become a place of coexistence and co-empathy, and a place where people can truly do understand each other. And it reminds me about this really famous discussion and dialogue between Guti and Ochebe, two African writers who were discussing the status of English language from that perspective, where, for example, Nguti was telling that we, as African writers, we have no right to write in English. We should write only in African because we are the result of the colonial violence. And the Chebe, on the other side, is absolutely opposite. He's telling that we should use English, but we should transform English into this really strange intercultural space. So if you, for example, have read his novel Everything Falls Apart, which is written in English, but it's not English, because when you read this novel, it's so based on African culture and food and traditions, then you cannot fully say that it's English. It's like English African. So, and I do believe that with Russian, at some point, it also will be possible. Not now, because now real people are dying now. But at some point, maybe it will be possible to make a language as a space of coexistence and co-empathy, and this. And there will be many Russians, like Russian, not Russians. So, and of course. When I was teaching Russian as a foreign language, I was creating this space. I wasn't just, working as, oh, this is a great culture and blah, blah, blah. I'm not a propagandist. I was making opposite thing. I wanted to make a language a place of our coexistence where they can share their views and experiences and so on. So I wanted them to feel Russian as a space where they can express something, they can find friends. And I was constantly telling them, no, you cannot speak in English between each other, because they tend to use English. It's easier for them to use English as a mediator speaker. But I was all the time saying, no, use Russian, because if you will use Russian as a language of your coexistence, you will learn language faster, because it will give you this amazing feeling of being a part of community. It will put you in this position. On the other side, unfortunately, yes, there are a high level of xenophobia and racism, and I was constantly facing it when I was a child, because at Russian school, I was constantly bullied for not being Slavic enough. And then you go to Azerbaijan, and they're also bullying you because you're Russian. And you're like, okay, so what the hell? I mean, where are you supposed to go? Because you have like zero sense of home there, and there you're all constantly feeling yourself as some really strange person who doesn't fit completely to any of these words. It took me years to understand that I'm cultural trickster, as Marina Tostanova says, and I'm just a person who can, cross these boundaries all the time. And this is, on the one hand, it's a tragedy, because it's a lot of pain and you cannot fully be a part. But on the other hand, it's a really, really big advantage, because it gives you the opportunity to be at the same time in different layers. And this is also really like tricky, because on the one hand, I was, yeah, I am a mediator. I am an ambassador, if you can say, of Russian culture, because I was teaching Russian as a foreign language, but at the same time I was also a victim of this aggressive Russification and xenophobia and racism, and it was really like balancing between these two pieces of puzzles, and also yeah, and also I was what I was really trying to do with my students. I was always caring how they feel. Are they bullied or not? Have they faced any sort of racism? I was really trying to feel them good. I was really trying to feel them safe. I didn't want them to face any of that, because I knew really well how it can be. So I guess it's also, maybe it made me even better teacher, because I knew what they can experience and what can they face, and that's why I wasn't just giving language. I was also trying to understand the level of safety, the level of how they feel themselves, where I can support them, how I can support them, not only as a teacher but also as a human being. But of course, at some point, it was always a really big question to me. I had a really strong and huge identification crisis at some point, because I was lost. Like, I lost almost my Azerbaijani. The only language I have is Russian, and at the same time, it's really violent sometimes towards me. And I was like really confused. Like, should I continue writing in Russian? Should I create something in this language if this language do not even see me as a subject? And at some point, I just decided that I have my right to create my not Russian. And I adore this essay of Gloria Anzaldúa, where she writes about Chicano language, when she says that people always tend to want her to speak only English or only Spanish, but she says, no, I will use my Chicano language with proud. I will use my border language, because I am a border. I am on this border, and I have right to use this language. And I truly believe I'm doing the same. I'm using my language of border. I'm using the language where you can find Azeri words and Turkish words, and all of them coexist. And it's written in Russian, but it's completely not Russian from the cultural perspective. So I want to create this special language space of border where all of that coexists. And I want to transform language into shelter where everybody can coexist and be themselves. And also what I was consciously making by writing this novel, and in my writing in general, I constantly put in this Russian text people who are not a part of canon, because we all know this canon of great Russian literature, and you will never ever see there not Slavic type of women as a subjects, as a human beings. I mean, yes, you can see Bella in Герой нашего времени from Lermontov. You can see, for example, this type of representation. But if you will read this novel really precisely, you will notice that Bella is not fully human being. She doesn't speak. She constantly silent. She was exchanged to the horse, which actually gives us a lot of understanding. And of course, it is because Герой нашего времени was written during the colonial times. And of course, like any novel, it's connected to time and political situation. But at the same time, I have never met, in Russian literature in general, in canon and in modern, I have never met people like my father there. I have never met people who dying from neurological disease there. I have never met people like me. And I decided, so I will put them there. So what I'm doing, I'm putting in this literature people who are never were a part of this canon or never were even subjects. For example, migrants, people who work at the bazaars, people who are dying from neurological diseases or some other different or have some chronic diseases, people who we never see. We never see them They exist and not exist at the same time, and I want them to be seen, and I want them to be a part of literature because they deserve to be there. And it's actually really funny how we tend to think that you should deserve being in literature. But actually, no, it's like with being. We have right of being automatically. We are human beings and we have our rights of beings. And this is exactly the same with words. I should, I'm not deserving to be a part of literature. I am a part of literature. So I wanted to do that. And that's why, yeah. So maybe in first novel, it's not so obvious. I do have second novel, and the second novel, it's really like, it's a little different. But in first novel, it's still there of these women who never seen, these women who you never noticed, or you constantly, or for example, in Russia, they also bullied, or they face a lot of xenophobia. And my mom was facing a lot of racism. And when I was child, I was all the time, I was a victim. I was witnessing all of that. I see all of that. I see like women in my family change their names into Russian names. Me, myself, I had a crazy story. Like, sit down, I will tell you this crazy story. I finished my university. I was fresh graduated. And of course, I was really insecure. I was searching for my first job and I wanted to work so badly. So I found some English school there. And I decided, because my English, so I really liked English and I knew it really well at that time, it's better than now. So and I wanted to teach English. So I came to job interview. And the job interview, everything was nice. Everything was good. I made some tests and they told me, you are a perfect candidate. We are really happy. But you know what? Can you please name yourself Yelena? And I was like, why? And they told me, because, like, I don't know, maybe kids, maybe like parents will not be happy that some not Slavic women are teaching them English. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Because, for example, British teachers, are they also should not teach English? I mean, what the hell? And they told me, but you got our point. So it will be easier for kids to remember your name. And remember, I'm fresh graduated, I'm really young, I'm really insecure, and this is my first ever job. So, of course, at some point, I felt that it's wrong, but at the same time, I wanted to work. So I said yes. And the funny part is that every time when kids were telling Yelena, I didn't react because it's not my name. So it was really funny because like kids were telling me, oh, Yelena, or they ask me something and I'm like, with who they're talking? Like, with who talking are these kids? Because it wasn't my name still. It wasn't attached to my body. And actually at the end, I quitted this job and I told this woman, I told her, you know what? I don't like your name. It's so Slavic and it's so simple. Maybe your name should be Miriam or something like that because it sounds so much better. And she was so offended. She was like, how dare you? And I was like, and how dare you? You was naming me other name for all period of my work. And for you, it was totally fine. And now when I'm doing the same, you feel offended. So maybe the issue is that you shouldn't do that anymore. Please don't do that anymore. Yeah. So, and this is funny at the same time, not really funny story, of course.
I can imagine the children thinking, what's wrong with her? She doesn't respond when we call her Elena.
Sure. Elena, why you're not reacting? Like, hello.
Yeah, what's your problem? I think it's a very beautiful thing you said about language as shelter, because I think this is really what you embody in your work, and I'm glad to hear that this is how you behaved and how you acted as a language teacher. Because for us, I have to say that we were also a little bit, oh my God, what's going on with Russia at this moment? And are we ambassadors? Are we also ambassadors of a certain regime or a certain ideological position? And luckily for us, we're very far away, and we are, well, maybe not unlike you. We cannot say we are Russians all, because we're so different, we're so far. So our distance is geographic and very easy to to esteem. We are far, we are not that. And but there is a thing that when you are put in a different culture, or when you were trying, or just because you're interested in a different culture, there is kind of this tendency to embody and to try to even like role play, to create like a character and believe you are that character. So but I think it's very clear from your work and you, that how you are in the border, really you are uh, embodying the contradictions and not like pretending, if not only because life has proven to you that it would be very hard for you either to pretend to be Russian or to pretend to be Azerbaijani, right? um, well, I have many other questions, but then I will be speaking endlessly, and I have my two very dear friends here with us. Julia, Thiago, if you want to step in, please feel free.
Thiago, you want to go first?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to wholeheartedly thank you for sharing your personal and writerly trajectory with us. Well, you mentioned the editorial trajectory of your book. That we are reading a Portuguese translation of the second edition of your book, which is substantially different from the first. And to the extent of my knowledge, your book has been advertised in Brazil as a novel, and you have been referring to it as a novel. However, as I read it, I must confess that I have been intrigued by this generic tag, by this designation, because, as you have said, there is an interweaving of presentational modes, of styles, of registers. There's a narrative section, an essayistic commentary on your poetry, and the book concludes with some lyric pieces, and there's even an afterword by someone else. So this book's a sort of mishmash of genres, styles, and presentational modes. The question that is obvious to us who have been recurrently discussing the creative and formal possibilities of the novel as a genre is whether do all these very different sections add up? Do they yield a totality, a cogent, intelligible totality? And if they do, may we define your book as a novel, or does your book transcend the very form of the novel? Have you moved beyond the genre? Moreover, may we say that this now very traditional mainstream genre, the novel, whether it cannot accommodate all the complexity, all the suffering of a person like yourself, who has endured so much disease, exile, destitution? Or does the formal fracture of your work thematize the complexity of your multi-ethnic, multinational, filled with suffering trajectory? Okay, I want to discuss the form of your book, because I was intrigued and taken aback by it, and you are a very, very experimental, gifted writer, and I want to publicly praise your writerly skills. Thank you so much.
Oh, it really means the world, to be honest. Yeah, I guess it can be somewhat confusing, because so what we define as a novel is only the first part. So the prosaic part is a novel, but it's also questionable because, for example, in terms of volume, it's really small, and it's not like, because according to the traditional definition of novel, it should be bigger, of course, and so on. But I still believe that the first part, the prosaic part, is still function as a novel because the system, the symbolic system, the system of images, like it all really whole. It works like this. It works like the one body. So it functions as it should function in novel, even despite the volume, and even despite that. Yes, in the end of this novel, the novel transforms into poetry, because it's also really important that in the final part of this novel, it doesn't function as a prose anymore. It became a lullaby, a poetic part, and only at that point we do understand is the end of story. It's also actually was a sign to me as a writer that this is the end of story, because I just understood that, okay, so if I'm going back to poetic form, it means I said everything I wanted. Because first, actually, I forgot to mention it, that initially I'm a poet and I was writing only poetry before that. And prose happened really unexpected. It was really it was really surprising even to me that I created a prose. And I kept answering myself, asking myself, why did I decide to write the novel? Why couldn't I just make a new poem or something? And I understood that it is because sometimes your life experience is so broad, it's so bigger than a poetic form, because poetic form is really specific. The poetic form is a bullet. It's really concrete. It's really short. It really works in a specific way. You cannot put anything you want in a poetic form. It really dictates what should be there, because the form itself is really precise. But at that point, I understood that my life experience is so broad and so difficult and so connected to each other. It's like a carpet. So I needed a prose as a form. But then when it's returned, and when in the end it closed with this lullaby, and I understood, okay, so now I told everything I wanted. But at the same time, yes, it is the book in general, not the first part, but the book in general is really hybrid. Yes, it is really complicated, because it's like a few types of genre at the same time. And I do agree with you, it's a brilliant definition that maybe it happens so because I cannot, the experience I'm describing, and the identity, my identity in general being so complex, cannot function only in one type of text. Maybe that's why everything I write, and the writing in general, transcend this general form, because it cannot just fix there. And it's actually funny. Yeah, I am also someone who cannot be categorized in one category, because I'm so many things at the same time, and my writing function exactly the same way. It cannot be categorized really strictly. You cannot say it's only the novel or it's only the poetry. It's like really, if it's really avoiding the definition. And I guess I'm also the result. I'm also someone who cannot be described really short. I mean, you cannot just say women. You should add all these layers. Otherwise, you will not see the wholeness. So, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting question. Thank you for that. I hope I managed to answer, but if I'm not, tell me.
No, you have fully addressed the question. Thank you so much, Julia.
Egana, thank you so much for your talk, and I'm sorry that I got online a bit late. So I have a question that is connected to what to Thiago's question, but it has also to do with what you've just said. It really caught my attention how you decided to represent yourself, and you talked a lot about the body, right? How important it was for you to represent this body that is other, but is also complex and has many facets, right, of existence, right? And then you talked about this multinationalities, about displacement, right? But I was also wondering if, I mean, this this experience, I mean, your I'm gonna put this, the way that you choose to represent yourself is through this metonymic body, right? That is divided into the chapters. And now you were also talking about about this idea of wholeness. And what I want to ask you is about the experience of writing yourself and representing yourself, right? And about the aesthetic and stylistic choices that you make in order to represent yourself. And then I think this is interesting because I can't, because it's interesting because I was reading your book, and I thought, okay, this is autofiction, but this also didn't feel like autofiction, precisely because you have this experimental take on the the representation of yourself. So I just want you to comment on that, because I really think that is a different take in your novel. This gesture of representing yourself is not through, let's say, I wouldn't say, as it is very common in autofiction to kind of provide a caricature of yourself, or maybe downplaying some parts of yourself, or exaggerating them. In your case, I think it's more interesting because it's metonymic and it's anti-totalitarian, which is in an opposite direction of what the novel originally does, which is to forge a kind of totality that doesn't really exist. Can you comment a bit on that? I don't know if I made myself clear, but I'm trying to describe what you were doing aesthetically in your novel and relating that to the notions of the body.
Yeah, so I'm so happy that you feel it, because it is really important to me. I didn't want, it's unfortunately, it's really often happens with the fictional literature. Sometimes it's fiction, and it is interesting only due to experience which was there, and it was something which I really afraid. I really was afraid that my story will be interesting only because of traumatic experience I'm telling, or the story I'm telling. Yeah, because it's really often so in after fictional literature. We do like it because it represents some experience, but the language itself, how it's written, is really often not in the focus. And for me, it was totally unacceptable, and I wanted to make opposite. I wanted to language be on the focus all the time. And first of all, I wanted the prose function linguistically as a poetry. And that's why the language is so, metaphoric. It's full of all these images on the image and on image and on image. It's not like typical prosaic type of writing, because I'm trying to be completely precise, like really go in a direction, really felt in a relationship with language fully, and to show through the language itself how it all function. And of course, it was really important and essential to represent Azerbaijani culture and folklore there. Folklore is not so obvious in the first novel, it's really obvious in third one, but it is one of the really important and essential layers for me. And I wanted to represent, for example, magical, view, because it's somehow connected to coloniality of knowledge. We know that usually, unfortunately, there is a norm of what can be described as knowledge, and really often knowledge, it's something which is written, which is produced by academy, which is blah, 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 blah. And in that case, magical, for example, or recepts, or your mom's fairy tale are not knowledges, because they not fit this criterion. But to be honest, let's be honest, the most essential and the most important knowledge you have is exactly that knowledge, because it's your body knowledge. Like the fairy tale which your mom was telling you when you were a kid, the prayer which you heard all the time from your father or grandfather, it is one of the most important knowledge you have in heritage, and you will give it to your kids, even unconsciously. And I wanted so badly also to put the dimension in a novel, and that's why it also has all these prayers, all these, special words which they use in different situations, because I wanted also somehow to show all these not academical types of knowledge, this knowledge which always under question, but it is the most essential type of knowledge. And so that way we can say that, yeah, it was and the form itself, it was like one of the main aims and one of the main goals of the novel itself was, of course, to represent all these layers, like all these layers of metaphors and images and symbols, and the language itself is one of the main heroes of this novel, because you cannot separate, for example, lullaby. If you will look precisely to the lullaby, you cannot separate Azeri part and Russian part. They are really like connected to each other, and I wanted the language function this way. And I do believe that maybe this allowed me finally to create something which is called after fictional, but is really function on so many. And for example, in one of the parts of novel, there are divs and genes. Remember in tongue, I guess it's in a part tongue, when I describe like people like to gossip, and then they gossip, their tongues become really big, like a jeans. So I really liked this. I really wanted to look on the body through language and through culture. I wanted all of them be unseparated from each other. And I'm really happy that at some point, maybe I managed to do so, because really often people do say, I really often heard that people say it's after fiction, but it doesn't look like typical after fiction. And this is why I like this novel. So many people actually do love this novel because of that, because it doesn't function as after fictional novel. And really often they do say that, oh, I was really scared to buy a novel because I hate after fiction, but then I read it and it was totally different from what I expected. And I'm really happy when people say it, because it was one of their goals. I also wanted to create something which will not meet your expectations, which will actually transform them, shake them to you, first of all, also for you to question yourself, what is after fictional to you? Because, so I think so.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think that was my question. I mean, I have to say that you're right about that. It did not meet any expectations. And I was really glad about that, because I think it goes, I like that kind of, I don't know if I can say if it's grotesque or, but this kind of zoom and of body parts to, maybe exaggerate some aspects of ordinary things in life. And it really reminded me it reminded me a lot of Yoko Taro. I don't know if you know her or if you read her. She's a Japanese writer, but she doesn't have any biographical works. But she's also talking about she also talks about this place of in-betweenness, right? Of being located in different cultures, in different languages. And I think in my reading, I really had this idea of displacement, but not displacement only as a negative word, as something that forced displacement, for example, which is something that we often see nowadays when you basically read in the news. right, of everything that is going on in the world, including Russia, the Ukraine, and so on. But in the sense that, and I don't want to, I don't want to give some kind of silver lining to immigration, but the notion of displacement as something that can create other modes of being, but also create other ways of representing and seeing yourself, and looking at your existence within the world. So I think that, I don't know, it really caught my attention in that sense.
Yeah, so I don't think actually it was the main topic in first novel. So, but it's really interesting that you can sense it, even despite it wasn't so obviously articulated there. Actually, I do also think that when you have this displacement in your own story, in your own being, and especially, and even if you have it only in a genetic memory, because there are so many generations who were also forced, displaced, or deportations, for example, and so many other layers of forced displacement. It's still, I do believe it's still on some level, it still stays inside of your body knowledge, and you still have it inside of you, even if you are personally didn't face the experience. In my case, I have double, or triple even, because I was also facing my own forced displacement. And I think that at some point, being really moving from the place where you was born and raised, and looking at your own life and your own experience as a narrative, and looking at from the distance, and also having the experience of being other in so many layers, because also when I was in Taiwan, I was also experiencing being other. It was really not easy. It was really difficult period of cultural assimilation, especially the first 3 months, because you don't know any because I didn't know any Chinese, and I couldn't function. I couldn't speak fully. I couldn't go somewhere without assistance. So it was really really difficult and really dramatic, because I was constantly also feeling myself again the other, but on so many layers, like other from the cultural perspective, and from the point of language you cannot speak and can fully express yourself. And of course, this actually allowed me maybe to look at my own body from the one hand as some foreigner can, I was sometimes I was just imagine that it's not my body, and I'm just looking at this body as somebody else. And I do believe that migration experience and the displacement experience give you this opportunity to do so, because when you are being a part of foreign country, or when you are being put it in another culture, you tend to look at yourself constantly from the perspective of locals, and from the perspective of the culture where you are in. And especially in Germany, for example, one of the good examples is I'm really loud for Germany. I talk really loud for them. And they really constantly making me, they constantly telling, oh, you speak too loud. Or can you please speak quieter? And actually it was really interesting, because before that I never noticed that I'm loud. I never was like, am I loud? And only in Germany I was like, oh, I'm loud. So from their perspective. And then you go to US and everybody is loud. And you're like, oh my God, I feel like at home. And you go to Brazil and everybody's loud. And you're like, I feel so happy, because the level of loudness is comfortable to me. I mean, I am as loud as other people, and I feel myself so comfortable, because in Germany, I automatically feel like I'm too loud.
This is so funny. I lived in Germany for a long time, and that's exactly my experience. It's exactly. I mean, I've had people coming up to me in a bar saying, can you please not laugh so loud? And I'm like, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? But I don't want to get into that, but I hear you. But I really, I don't know. I'm sorry. Can I just ask one more question? Can you comment? I mean, you're saying, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the beginning of your talk. I don't know if you talked about this already, but would you be able to talk a little bit about your other novels, or is this the only novel?
No, yeah, I didn't actually. Thank you for your question, because I didn't mention it in the beginning, and I think it should be mentioned for understanding fully. Because despite now we're discussing only the first novel, there are 3 novels, and all of them are part of trilogy actually. So, but they are really designed in a way that you can read them as separated novels, or you can choose and read them as trilogy. So they read it in a way that you can do both. So, and first novel is the one we're discussing now, and also there was second novel, Doaze Neverного, Prayer for Infidel, which was published in 2024, and which is telling the story of my brother. And third novel, which was actually written in Germany already when I was in exile in 2024, I started working on this novel, and it's titled Terra Nullius, and this is about the experience of exile, and every part is written in a really specific way because it's written like a fairy tale. So every chapter is some magical fairy tale telling the story of family members, and specifically telling the story of how my parents met and get married. So chronologically, Terra Nullius is the earliest. It's like you're going back in history, and then you go back to, and then you have Hans, and then you have Doa. So chronologically, they're like really interestingly, in an interesting day they designed. And yeah, so it is, and that's why I was keeping and for example, Terra Nullius is really connected to Azerbaijani folklore and fairy tales, and I do use the language of fairy tale there, and I do use the images, and it's really connected to this Azerbaijani type of gaze and of cultural gaze. But the Dua is absolutely opposite, because it's really devoted to Russia. It's like really connected to Russia. And it is devoted to land, to the city where I was born and raised, Yekaterinburg. It's in the middle of Russia. It's Urals. So, and second novel is devoted to my brother, but also to my city where I was born and raised. And the city is speaking with the heroes. So the city is speaking with the heroes with Ural poetry, like cities speaking with poetry of Ural poets, and that was really like, and it's the most Russian of my novels, I guess. It is the second one. So the second one is really focused on my relationship with Russia in general. So it is really interesting, but at the same time, the reader has right. You can choose. You can read them as a trilogy, or you can read them as separated novels, and it's also fine. You will not. It's also okay. So yeah.
Are they coming out in Brazil? I mean, it depends on the translator. So I'm just.
I hope so, but I guess it depending on how first I guess it's depending on how the first one will be, you know, how her life will be. So
Thank you. I would really. I mean, have they been translated into English?
Yes. No. So this is actually really interesting that the novel which was translated, it's only the first one. So the first one was translated into German and English and Swedish, and also Portuguese. And other novels are not yet, but I'm really hoping that they will be at some point. But I guess for publishers, it's also really essential to wait and to see the perception of the first novel before they do something else. So yeah, let's hope that everybody will buy the first novel and they will be ready to publish second.
Fingers crossed.
I still have a question about, surprise. Julia was, very aptly conveying her, readerly surprise, but when she was confronted by your fiction, that one of the elements of your book that certainly flouted my expectations was the near absence of the theme of skin color, which is recurrently one of the most prominent themes in quote-unquote post-colonial fiction, because skin color emerges only indirectly. Okay, in your book, I think only in the chapter titled "Legs," if I recall it correctly, which is a rather astonishing place to talk about, skin color, because, as one knows, skin is generally not in full display. The skin of one's legs, it is generally not in full display. So why have you? There's no chapter titled "Skin" in your book, and one would think that a writer so devoted to fictionalizing, post-colonial encounters would explicitly deal with skin color. Why have you decided to keep this very prominent and recurrent post-colonial theme nearly absent from your book? And I found this intriguing and surprising.
Yeah, you know that I guess in Toni Morrison novel Beloved, she also doesn't name the skin, but we know automatically, and she talks about that the readers know automatically who's black. Because she's doing that using other instruments like the speech, and so she's doing that through other mediators, and I really love this novel. It's one of my favorite novels, Beloved. And on the one hand, it's actually a really interesting and also really essential and complicated question in Russia also, because I don't know, do you know that, but it is described in novel a little bit, that, for example, in Russia, if you are not Slavic, if you are from Caucasian region, or if you are from Central Asia, they do tend to offend you by telling black. So the really famous, popular offend mark of this bad word is when they call you black, even despite you're not black. And it's actually the reason why, when we were translating the novel in US, we were really facing challenges, because we didn't know how to do that. Because if we will use blackie and these types of words, it will create the image that I'm African American and I have black skin. So we made a really long explanation why we're using this word, and we explained exactly that it was because in Russia they do use it as they do offend you by using this word, even if from the world perspective you are white, which is also actually insane, because in the main parts of the world you're white, but in the Russia you're black, and it's like really interesting to be at this and in between these two positions, and at the same time I do think that, unfortunately, I do see that sometimes identification, we tend to categorize each other. We want to put each other in some boxes so badly. We want to categorize every human being and say, oh, this is this and this is that. And skin color became a really comfortable, a really popular way to do so. We do categorize each other by skin color. It's tragically known that during the racism and fascism, it was also so. They also categorized people according to their skin color and ethnic background. So I didn't want any categorization. I didn't want the reader to actually, I wanted them not to, I didn't want mention that, to put emphasis on that, because I wanted actually to do this just a part of organic being. Like, there are trees, there are plants, there are flowers, and there are different types of skin, and all of them just coexist. So I do not need to say, oh, this flower is that flower. When we, for example, when you look at the nature, we don't want to know how everything named, how everything is titled. Everything just coexists, and we coexist with the nature. And I do think that with human beings, it's really essential from time to time to remind yourself that other human beings are just beautiful. They're just creatures, and you should just, I don't know, you should enjoy it without trying to categorizing people. Because categorization, unfortunately, is a really easy way to come to radicalization. And radicalization is violence, almost always, as we know from the 19th century, especially. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we have questions from the audience, although we would have more questions, I guess. I mean, we barely touched the topic of the machine and the body. I was really curious to explore that further. It was very shocking, especially in the end when you put the manual. I mean, if you allow me, in the end, I would like to finish our talk with a quotation from the manual. I think it's beautiful the way you mix the objective text, technical text of the manual with your voice, your human voice reacting and reacting to that. Anyways, I think let me find here our questions. There is one, I will put it in Portuguese, but we'll translate. Fluffy Bernardo, he's always there, or she. Thank you for the lecture. If you could talk about how does it feel? How is it to be two times a victim of nationalism in Russia and in Germany, where refugees haven't been treated that well?
Oh yeah, I don't know. I have this joke, that in my case, I don't know, writing and suffering should go together like a box. And I don't know at what point can I just have only one part? I mean, writing, of course, and not suffering. But right now I'm having both. And it's really funny, because I came to Germany and I also felt immediately of me being Ausländer, me being this migrant, especially considering that unfortunately nowadays anti-migration moods in Germany are really high, and people are really not happy with the level of the amount of migrations and migrants and refugees in Germany. And they, of course, also tend to categorize you, tend to define you, tend to, I don't know. And unfortunately, let's say it's not only Germany, it's not only Russia, it's all over the world. Migrants are really easy enemies, because it's really easy to blame them for literally everything. I mean, any issue you have in your country, you can just say it's because of migrants. And what is the craziest part, people will believe you. They will not even question that. So when you are being, and of course it was really, I don't think I faced such a violent way of nationalism which I was facing in Russia. In Russia, it was, of course, absolutely different, because in Russia it was violent. It was really obvious. It was really dangerous, especially during 19th and early 2000s. Unfortunately, right now the level of xenophobia and racism is really growing. It's really insane now, it was absolutely heartbreaking. I do monitor what's going on in this sphere in Russia, and literally every day I see how people were bullied, beaten, because they are not Slavic. In Germany, it's not so extreme now, of course, thanks God. It's not so extreme yet. Let's hope that it will not be, but I still unfortunately faced a few episodes of human rights, human hates, and how, I don't know, for example, especially when I was searching for the flat, because Like nobody wants to give you a flat if you're a migrant. Nobody wants to talk if you don't speak proper German. You cannot go to, I don't know, for example, every government structure, every hospital, if you will go to the hospital, if you need a doctor attention, you can use only German. If you don't speak the language properly, you should either find translator somewhere, and it's not clear where, or you should just, I don't know, die, obviously. So it's like, it's really sad. And I do feel that now it's even getting worse, because the situation around the migration is getting worse. And I do hope, I want to believe that people at some point will stop all this bullshit, because I cannot understand how people keep doing that, especially knowing what happened during the 20th century, especially knowing the Holocaust, especially knowing what it's like, what world looks like, and people still keep doing all these stuffs. They still keep doing wars and racism, and I don't understand why we are so stupid. Like, why we do need the repetition of history again and again and again, because we cannot learn our lessons from the first time. So it is easier, but it's still, in Germany it's even maybe more complicated, because it's not obvious. People are not making it really obvious, but they doing this in a hidden way. It's like exactly with the voice, when they just go and say you're too loud. Or for example, I had that episode which really traumatized me. Because first 10 months we were living in a refugee camp. And I wanted to have some place where I can work. And I found a museum where there was a Wi-Fi and a room for working, and it was really comfortable. So I kept going there from time to time to work, to read, to do something. And actually people there were talking, it was allowed. But at some point, a library, she came to me and she was like, you know what, you can come here and work, but please don't talk, because you're too loud. And that was so traumatized by that. I really cried, and then I answered her, I will never ever come here again, just because it's my principle now. So never ever you will see me again, because I will never go to a place where when you're ready to discriminate someone only because they do not speak Deutsch, or only because they are too loud, or only because they do not look like typical German people. So no. But unfortunately, I do face from time to time these episodes, and it's really killing me. So I would like a world to wake up, finally, and to understand that, please, let's just maybe, learn the history. Let's just look what happened before, and try to fix it at some point. Yeah.
They can't help it. It's stronger. I guess you were mentioning before we started about the reactions that you had about the book in Europe, for instance, that they clearly see you as other, right? As the Azerbaijani woman, story of an Azerbaijani woman. And just like from myself, and maybe Julia or Thiago could say something, it wasn't, maybe it could be interesting for you to hear our reaction more personal, on a more personal level. It wasn't strange at all. It was funny that it was so familiar. Lots of what you describe about like the family dynamic of women, the position of women, of sexism, of the difficulties with the body, especially for women, the gossip and everything. It was clear that it was a different culture, but at the same time, it didn't sound that strange and another world for us, I guess. I guess we will be hearing lots of other reactions and responses to your book, but on my part, I would say that it wasn't really. I think Svetlana Uruseshvili, who writes the afterword for your book, even mentions that there's something about being in the periphery of the center of capitalist world that unites us, I guess. So that's why maybe when Julia was in Germany, she's experienced something similar, and myself also. So yeah. There is one comment here. It's not really a question. Giovanna Tabano Pires said, "This is so interesting and thought-provoking. Thank you so much for all the amazing references, Egana. I want to read the book as soon as possible. If you are in Rio, there is going to be a book launch tonight at 7 p.m. in Livraria Alento in Flamengo. If you are in São Paulo, in Minas, in Campinas, many cities, you can access the website, the Instagram profile of Vita, the publisher. You have Egana tour, bigger than Shakira and Lady Gaga. She's gonna be
But
everywhere.
there will not be so much people as to Shakira, unfortunately. Yes. Maybe
Worse
I
for
should
them.
dance. No, maybe I should dance, and people will come. I think so.
Egana Palooza we're having now. It's very good. I mean, there is a whole thing. And also, if you're in Rio, Egana will be joining us in person. This was supposed to be in person today, but tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, she'll be teaching a mini course on Russian language, contemporary poetry. We're really looking forward to that, so that you all know about it. There is more. Again, Giovanna said, this conversation reminds me of one of my favorite books, Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. It deals with dictatorship and missing objects. Things get to a point that people's body parts starts to disappear. And
I
she
want to read this book so badly. Wow, it sounds amazing.
It sounds amazing, right? And she added, I think I never fully understood what bodies missing might mean before this lecture. So I think she was combining your talk to this previous.
I will read this book.
Egana, please come to Brazil again.
I won't. I don't want to leave, actually. I will try again.
That should be better. Don't go away. Victoria Cristina asked, would you say that the suppression of the right to write and to access literature also compromises the exercise and development of knowledge, given how essential it is to our self-awareness? I think I would like to add something to this question, because I was at some point in the book you were talking about, I think it was hands, and you were talking about how for women, organizing the house was their work, their text, how they express themselves, but in a way that it was supposed to not to express your individuality or to yourself, but to please others. So you have to have this very beautifully organized. This thing with cleanliness is also very Brazilian. You know, we're very obsessed with everything. The house has to be perfect, has to be organized, tidy, and so on. And I was thinking, connected to this question, you are expressing yourself not in a way as to please. So you are distancing yourself from this tradition of women expressing, not through your house, not through your environment and the environment that other people live in, but writing. Yeah, and unlike the other women in your family, your hands are made for writing, and you are in a way carrying your heritage, but expressing it in a different media, and making books and writing and using language to organize and express that. I will put the question back here so that it makes sense. Yeah, so if you can comment on that, because it's this becoming a writer, a poet is a way of carrying this heritage, but also surpassing it and distancing yourself from it, right?
Yeah, and I do believe that the question also, I maybe I'm wrong, but if I understood it right, it's about these not typical types of knowledge or oppressed types of knowledge, like, for example, fairy tales and so on, and that by not giving us right to write, and we also do oppress these types of knowledge, not give them to be represented. Yes, I do believe so. I do believe it's connected, and that's why I think it's so essential, first of all, to yeah, first of all, to write about it, to express it, and not even, let's also say that it's not always should be written word. For example, there is so many traditions where the literature was oral. And even, for example, in Azerbaijani tradition, Azerbaijani poetry in the beginning was oral. It was something which people was talking and not writing. It was like people were going, attending, for example, some weddings or some cultural events where they were supposed to improvise, through improvisation, create a poetic text. So it never was a written world. It was oral world, which was then, which they learned, and then they were making it again, singing that again and again, and repeating that again and again. So yeah, I do believe that we should definitely express more, or express more these types of knowledges and value these types of knowledges which were always under the oppression and under the control. And for me also, yes, I really happy, and I really even surprised that at some point I discovered that words can bring me joy, and that that it is the only thing I want to do, and that I want to express myself through words. Yeah. Mhm.
I think I skipped one question. Fluffy Bernardo also asked about the regime, the current regime in Russia, if the government has been co-opting writers to defend the regime today. I think it's in Russia, right?
There are definitely some types of writers who are serving the regime and the ideology. Um, they called Zetniki, so Z literatura. It calls Z literature. It's basically the writers who support war, and they do create this new ideology of new heroics, of new war literature about the heroes and about it, etc., etc. So there are groups of writers who are doing that, and of course they are really supported by government. They supported financially. They having grants. They having enemies. They need to continue their work. And in opposition to them, unfortunately, all the writers who now express anything against the government or against the regime or against the situation in country, they are not only, first of all, they are getting prohibited, they are getting excluded from their bookshops, from the literature in general. Their books are not published. And so it is absolutely, it's really heartbreaking what's going on now in the literature. We can also say that censorship returned. Now there are so many rules what can be and not be in literature. For example, right now on a government level, it is prohibited to express anything about LGBTQ community. So if you will, for example, represent any like queer experience in a positive way, you are breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
So you can express this only in negative way, only in negative. And this is also, and it's also, and this works the same about drugs. So now they also created a recent law about drugs. So now even if you just mention, I don't know, some name of drug, it can you can mark it on your book. They should mark it. Publishers should mark it and write down on your book that you are mentioning drugs and drugs are not good, and etc. And the absurd part is that it's even works for the literature of, for example, 20th century. Literally yesterday, Maria told me that she saw a book of Olga Berkowitz, a writer which was writing in the 20th century. And because in her autobiography she mentions Morphe, on her book is titled with this thing. And it's like it's so absurd. And and also, for example, you can find nowadays in Russia, you can find books which were censored, so they are blacked out. For example, the biography of Puzzolini, because he was an open gay, the part of the book just black. You cannot read it. So you buying the book, and some of the parts of the book just black. So as you can see, the censorship that like it's all returned,
Mhm.
and it's really scary, to be honest, because I don't know what will happen next. Already right now, many publishing houses which are still functioning, they are heroes because they just surviving. They try to keep going, but it's becoming difficult and more difficult and difficult with every single day. So it's like, yeah.
Even feminism was considered a kind of extremist discourse, right? It's
Yeah,
banned.
feminism, yes, of course. And for example, decolonial writing. So if everything connected to post-colonial, decolonial, difficult memory, difficult heritage, everything devoted to these topics nowadays are also really problematic. And you can have a lot of troubles because of that.
Yeah. We have Karina has just written a very long and interesting question in the chat. Karina will be talking to you later tonight at the bookshop. But I think it's interesting for us to at least mention the topics that she raises. She says, after hearing Egana talking about the relation of the other two novels with the city, she was curious to know how you see this relation in this novel that we are now talking about. The organization of the chapters referred to her to created for her a link to some sort of a map that leads to the process of the narrative, not the narrative or plot properly per se, but to the possibility of writing. It is interesting how each part of this body can be a point in this map that leads to a certain event, like, the anatomy as like a map. Breaking with any pretension to linearity, to linear, and chronology of events. In summary, she's curious to hear you talk about this relation between body and territory.
Yeah, so the first novel, so the geographical location is not so important in the first novel. It's really essential in first one, for example, and in second. But in first one, it is like body functions as a space, as a territory. So body becomes the main geography, because the main like focus of the first novel is of course on our bodies, is also as places of where our ancestors lived and died, places of our personal history and suffering and trauma. For example, all these scars or anything which your body can be considered as a map of your pain, for example, because you have so many marks or things on your body which are left, and by telling the story of them, you can also express the story of your suffering, of the pain, and your relationship with the pain. And plus, I think this is really essential in this specific novel, why I don't have geographical territory and the main focus is only on the body as a geography, because it was really important to because the heroine and me, we facing a really serious neurological disease which affects my body functioning and which affects my ability to control my body, and is also unfortunately caused a lot of pain, because it caused a lot of spasms and in pain. It was also really essential to show all these places of pain and suffering and body suffering, because I wanted to also represent the experience of people suffering from neurological diseases and chronological diseases and invisible disabilities. Because, for example, my condition can be described as invisible disability. Most of the days people do not even think that something is wrong, because I do look normal, I do look like a functional person, as abled person, somebody who is not like functions. But at the same time, it is possible only because I do have machine. If I will turn it off, you will see that my body is absolutely like I am fully disabled. I cannot do a lot of things. And sometimes I do have bad days and good days, and during the bad days, even with machine, my body is still function bad. For example, I can work only with cane, or it's difficult for me to be really active in a physical way. And it's really interesting how people treat the invisible disability, because sometimes, for example, they do not trust you when they see you and most of the days fully functioning, and then they see your bad days and they start automatically assuming, for example, that you're manipulating, or it's not real, or it's not a big deal. And it's really interesting. And I wanted also to use body as a territory of this bigness, as a territory where, because we all, as Susan Sontag told, we all have two citizenships. First one in a healthy land, and second one in the land of illness. You just don't know at what point your second citizenship will be revealed. But you all have these two citizenships. At some point, you all will have both of them. So, and it's also really interesting. And I wanted to use body as a map also of this, of pain, of ability, disability, of making, not make, to show this layer also.
Great, Egana, thank you so much for your time, your patience, your generosity of speaking to us for these 2 very pleasant hours. I would like just to wrap up by reading a very small excerpt of the manual, if you allow me. I will read it in Portuguese because I guess most of our audience is Brazilian, and I think you will recognize what part I'm reading. There's a moment where she takes this one part of the manual and then she kind of replies to it. O implante pode falhar a qualquer momento devido a uma falha aleatória do componente. Agora em itálico, né? Uma revolução, uma guerra, a queda de um regime político, uma epidemia, uma pandemia, um deslocamento forçado. Esse é o eco que a Egana faz do manual. Good. We don't hear you, Egana. Are you? Yeah.
You have to unmute your mic, Egana.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just saying that I recognized what part you're reading, even despite I don't know Portuguese.
Yeah. Revolução, guerra. I think it sounds familiar. Yes, with that, I would like to again invite everybody to take part wherever you can to the tour of Egana in Brazil, reading the book, reading the novel, reading the poetry. Egana is really talented, and we're very happy and honored to have had the chance to talk to you, Egana, today. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Egana,
for your amazing questions.
coming over to talk to us. I'm sorry that this didn't take place in person.
Yeah.
But I see you tonight.
Yeah, I hope so. Let's do that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Egana. It was a pleasure, an honor to be in dialogue with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It was, yes.
Bye.
Bye.